Hi everyone. I thought it would be useful to walk through some of the techniques that you learned in this module in ArcGIS so that you can see how they're implemented. Point data are becoming more and more widespread. A lot of geospatial data come in point format, so it's helpful to see some ways that you can analyze these in GIS. So up here, I have a shapefile of narcotics or drug arrests that occurred in the city of Buffalo. And underneath, I just have a base map for the world street map so that we can see a little context about where in the city these arrests happened. So one of the simplest ways to analyze point data is just to identify some characteristics of how the data are distributed or spread across the map. So the first thing we can look at is where the center of the data is located. And to do this in GIS, you can use the mean center tool. So you can go over here and search and just type in mean center. And this tool that's in the spatial statistics toolbox pops up. So if we open the mean center tool, the input features are going to be our narcotics file. In the output feature class here, I'm just going to call the output mean center, and I put it in a folder where I can locate it afterwards if needed. For the weight field, if each individual point had more than one occurrence or attribute associated with it, you could use this, but since in this data set each point represents one crime, I'm going to leave this blank. If you wanted to group your features into different groups and calculate separate mean centers for each group, you could use the case field. And similarly, you could do it with attributes using the dimension field, but we're going to leave those blank for now. So if I hit OK, the mean center runs and it placed this giant green circle where the mean center of the crimes is. So the geographic center of all of these points. You can see it's pretty much smack dab in the center of the city, and that's because most of the crimes are distributed all around the city. So it gives us an indication, but it doesn't give us as much information as maybe we want to know about where specific pockets of crime in the city are or how the crime is distributed around the city. Computing the directional distribution or the standard deviational ellipse can provide a bit of a more helpful look at where the crimes are occurring in terms of how they're distributed across the city. So to do this, we can go back to our search box and type in standard deviation. And this directional distribution is what we want. So click on that one. The input feature class is again going to be the narcotics file, and the output ellipse feature class is going to be something representative, so standard deviational ellipse. Hit OK. The ellipse size, you can choose 1, 2, or 3 standard deviations. We'll stick with 1 for now. Again, we don't have weights for these, and we're not going to group them, so we can leave the weight field and the case field blank. We'll click OK. And you can see this purple ellipse is the one standard deviational directional ellipse using the narcotics points. So what that's telling us is that pretty much 68% or so of the crimes are within this purple ellipse, and you can see it's directionally kind of facing the northwest to the southeast. So most of the crimes are trending within this ellipse and in that direction. Another useful measure you can compute is called a convex hull. In ArcGIS, it's actually called a minimum bounding geometry. So if you type that in here, that's going to bring up the tool. Now the minimum bounding geometry it basically connects the outermost points so that you get a polygon that encompasses all of your points. This can be really useful if you're studying species and you want to look at kind of their range within a particular area. So we can click on that. Our input features, again, narcotics. Our output feature class, I'll just put convex hull. We'll save that. The geometry type, we want to choose the convex hull. If we choose the rectangle area, it's going to make the kind of minimum bounding rectangle, but we want to actually connect the points. So that one's the convex hull. We're not going to choose any of the group fields, and we are going to then just click OK. Okay, and you can see here that the convex hull, this kind of pink polygon, has been added to the map. Now again, it's not super helpful because it's just basically outlining the outermost points. And we can see, if I turn off some of these layers here, we can see that, you know, we actually have pockets of maybe higher density areas of arrest throughout the city. So if we wanted to have a tool that could actually tell us where those hot spots of crime were occurring, one tool that you can use is the kernel density estimator. So if we go up here to search and we put in kernel density, we can open up the kernel density toolbox. Again, narcotics is our input. We're going to leave the population field blank. The output raster, I'm going to call KDE for kernel density estimator. And the output cell size, I'm going to make 100. And I'm going to change the area units down here to square kilometers. You can leave the search radius blank, and you can leave the output values as densities and the method as planar. And if we hit OK, we can see here the kernel density surface has been added to ArcGIS. So it's helpful here to just go into properties and set the display to a bit transparent. So maybe 40% transparent here. And that'll just let us kind of see through some of these, the surface down to the base map below. So if we turn off our narcotics points or kind of toggle between, we can see that some higher pockets of crime or narcotics arrests occurred around the periphery here, or kind of along the highway, and then over here on the east side. So I'm also going to change the symbology here to something a little bit more contrasting. So potentially maybe this pink to blue color ramp here, so that we can really see where the hot spots of activity are happening. Now, the breaks for the kernel density estimator aren't particularly meaningful or intuitive the way that the program creates these numbers. So we can create a more meaningful representation of these densities by using a technique or a trick that's known as slicing the data. So this is going to reclassify the data based on the probability of having a drug arrest in a certain area. This is a common technique for wildlife data, because slicing the data at, say, a 95 percentile gives us an idea of the an area where we're 95% confident that we would find an animal or a plant in question in that area. So we typically do a slice at maybe 50% or 90% that just give us some sort of more meaningful representation of the densities. So to do this, you want to right-click on your layer and go to Properties. And we want to, in the Symbology tab here, we want to hit Classify, and that will bring up the classification window. So we're going to change this to Manual. Actually, change it back. It's a little trick in GIS. You have to change the classes before you change to manual, and we only want 3 classes. So change the classes first, and then change it to manual, and you see this got grayed out a bit. So now what you have to do here is over next to break values, you want to hit the percentage sign. That's going to convert where the breaks were in terms of kind of numerically into where these breaks are according to the percent of the values within each break. And so we're going to set these to 50, 95, and then 100 for the last one to make sure that we capture everything. So our first slice will be everything basically greater than 50%, and then we'll get one that's greater than 95%. We hit OK, and then hit Apply. So you can see here we now only have 3 classes. We hit Apply, and OK. And you can see here that the symbology of the layer has been changed from a whole bunch of gradient symbols to really just the 3 colors. Areas in the turquoise are areas where there's less than 50% chance that we would have a narcotics arrest. The areas in the dark purple are areas where we have between 50 and 95% chance. And then the pink hotspot areas are where we have a greater than 95% chance of having a narcotics arrest in that area. So if we zoom in on one of these hotspots here, the base map takes just a second to load. But we can see that the hotspot is centered on an intersection where we have 3 streets coming together. So Arkansas Street, Grant Street, and Hampshire Street. And that's where we have a really high density of narcotics arrests happening. So the kernel density estimator gives us a good idea of where we might be seeing high densities of our points. And once you can drill down or slice the data, we can figure out where these hot pockets are and use that to then investigate what might be happening in these areas that's either leading to lots of drug arrests or what types of other activities might be occurring in this area that we can correlate with narcotics arrests. So hopefully this tutorial gave you some ideas as to how you can analyze point data in ArcGIS and how you can use results from, say, a kernel density estimator to, as a launching point to start digging into what might be happening in these neighborhoods causing these spatial patterns.